if the startup doesn't really need your money, but they're doing well, VCs actually get excited. They get even more excited.
Have the conversation now. Get to know folks now. Because you as a founder need to plan for that outcome. You need to decide whether or not you want to meet those expectations that Nuno shared.
So my advice to those guys is, yes, start the conversation early, get to know the people, but don't fall into the trap of doing a whole bunch of stuff for them, which is what they're going to ask for.
The right time to start raising capital is now. And the second best time to start raising capital is yesterday.
Welcome back to the MeetFounders YouTube channel, everybody. Today, we're going to hear from some active VC investors on when is the right time to raise capital. So the goal today is to kind of get some insights on when should you start, how long before your fundraising should you kind of begin, and what kind of grabs their attention, what kind of grabs their interest when a new startup is reaching out to them. You might be surprised with some of the information that you hear. So enjoy the video. This was recorded at one of our venture capital conferences. You can attend in person at our next conference and grab a ticket at meetfounders.co. Hope to see you there. Cheers.
I'll be moderating today's panel on the right time to raise capital. To kick things off today, and it definitely seems like we have an awesome sort of breadth and depth of venture experience here and across different geographies and verticals. So I think this is going to, lend toward a really great conversation for our attendees here. So let's kick things off as broadly and as simply as possible, I guess. And let's answer the question of when is the right time to raise capital?
My first answer is never. I mean, if you can build a company and not raise venture capital, that's the ideal, right? I mean, that's that. And, coming back to the entrepreneur's point of view, you want the entrepreneur to kind of try to build a business without capital if they can, get some revenues going and recycle that or just use your own money or whatever, right? So I come up against that a lot. A lot of startups just think they need to raise venture capital and they don't necessarily need to have all that, baggage hanging on to them. But the other answer is, of course, when you need it, and specifically, you got to organize your raise around kind of milestones, right? So you don't want to you have these valuation increases in your company based on events that happen from the get-go, and you want to kind of raise around those events so that you're maximizing your value.
What I always say to entrepreneurs is two things, right? The best two times to raise money are one, when you don't need it, right? And when you don't need it sounds very counterintuitive. It's like, well, why would I then raise it? Well, because again, you can accelerate, you can hire people faster, because from a cash position, you'll be in a position to do that. When you don't need the money, for some reason, VCs want to give you the money. And I think, unfortunately, not on this panel, we're all very unique individuals who believe in fundamental analysis and due diligence and all of that. But obviously, there's a little bit of lemming mentality in venture capital. And so in some ways, it's a little bit of playing that game. So if the startup doesn't really need your money, but they're doing well, VCs actually get excited. They get even more excited. The second best time to raise money is 3 to 6 months before you need money. Not when you need it, but like 3 to 6 months when you need it, because that's more or less how long it's going to take you to raise, right? You need to prepare a pitch deck. You need to do the first horizon pitches, which I always recommend to entrepreneurs. You shouldn't do with your wish list. You shouldn't do your first 5-10 pitches with your absolute must-have VCs, right? Because you're probably not going to do well, right? Your pitch is not going to be sort of crystallized. Your ability to sell, it's a sales pitch. Your ability to sell won't be there.
A perspective that may sound a little bit contradictory is in fact not. That the right time to start raising capital is now. And the second best time to start raising capital is yesterday. And here's why. Not only was it shared that it takes a lot longer than most people think, so you should have started yesterday. But agree, Colin's right, that it's surprising how many folks realize that only about 1% of all new companies raise venture capital. It's actually a very, very rare circumstance to raise venture capital. And And so starting the conversation much more quickly than you think, in fact, actually saves founders and investors a tremendous amount of time. Have the conversation now. Get to know folks now. Because you as a founder need to plan for that outcome. You need to decide whether or not you want to meet those expectations that Nuno shared. Are you building a company that could deliver a 100x return? I'm sorry, a 10x return. If you're not, or you don't want to, if you're not, or you don't want to, there's nothing wrong with that at all, right? There's a socialization in our economy and in society today that venture capital is either a great thing or it's a terrible thing. That's a terrible way to approach building a company, building a business. Lots of businesses are wonderfully successful without any funding, without any cap table, without incorporating in Delaware. If you want to do that, though, start the conversation now so that you understand what it takes, so you understand what investors are looking for well in advance, because you need to plan ahead for what those stages look like that Colin referred to, what those outcomes look like. If you don't plan ahead for those, you're not likely to build the kind of company that's going to meet the expectations that investors are looking for, making it all that much more difficult and cumbersome and laborious and take even longer, because once you finally have the conversation, you see a lot of founders' light bulbs go off. Oh, that's what I need to do to raise capital. I got it. I'll go do that now. Well, you should have started doing that from the get-go. So I believe in the idea of raising capital now, even though you don't actually intend to raise it today. You want to start the conversation as quickly as possible and have that outcome in mind. Talk from the perspective of what you intend to accomplish eventually when you start the conversation, so that you can get the advice and the perspective that helps you do that.
On something that Paul said, I think really very important, it's this notion of setting expectations, which conversations early on, and you're saying, I mean to achieve this. If you achieve it, that is huge, right? So if 2 months or 3 months down the line, you come back to some of the VCs that you have conversations with, you basically have this to prove. I told you I was going to do it, and I've actually hit it and plus. And that makes a huge difference, because it's almost like we went through sort of a soft due diligence over the last 2 to 3 months. Timing normally is very much used by us as VCs in terms of defining, how the company's progressing, how they're evolving, how their numbers are moving. If we have the benefit of time, we will use it. And so if you, on the other hand, have the benefit of time, you better deliver on it. Because if you deliver on it, you have an amazing story. If you don't, you're sort of negative bias, right? It's like, okay, you clearly are not hitting your numbers. You said you're going to launch. Consumer hardware is a very great example of that. We're going to launch, and like, what? Well, 6 months you haven't launched yet. So why should we talk? Why is it more de-risked now? Why is this better than it was some time ago? So you're not hitting your numbers. You're not hitting your timelines. You're not hitting your milestones. Again, if you hit them, super powerful. If you don't, very negative bias.
But what ends up happening sometimes is entrepreneurs will get a lot of calls from venture cap guys saying, hey, we hear about you. Can you send us some data? Can you do this? Can you put together a little report for us, or things like that? And that can be overwhelming. And a lot of entrepreneurs I know, acquiesce, and they do a lot of that work and take away from super valuable resources in an early stage where every day, every minute counts. And so my advice to those guys is, yes, start the conversation early, get to know the people, but don't fall into the trap of doing a whole bunch of stuff for them, which is what they're going to ask for.
Thank you so much to our panelists and our attendees. Eva, thank you so much for setting everything up, and I'm sure we'll all connect again soon.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Bye-bye.